My daughter-in-law smiled as she handed me the keys. "We trust you completely, Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with honey. But trust, I would soon discover, was just another word for control. And the cameras hidden throughout their mansion weren't there for security. They were there for entertainment. Mine, specifically. My name is Margaret Holloway. At 68 years old, I'd spent 4 decades as a high school literature teacher in suburban Chicago. Shaping young minds and living quietly in the brownstone my late husband Richard and I had restored together. After Richard's sudden heart attack, the house felt cavernous. Every room echoed with memories that used to comfort me, but now just amplified the silence. That's when my son Trevor and his wife Vanessa swooped in with their generous offer. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone at your age," Trevor had said over dinner at their estate in Winnetka. "We have that entire guest wing. You'd have your own space, and the twins would love having Grandma around." Vanessa nodded enthusiastically, her perfectly veneered teeth gleaming. "Plus, we could really use help with the girls. My lifestyle blog is taking off, and Trevor's law practice is booming. It's a win-win." I should have heard the transaction in her voice. Should have noticed how she phrased it. Not as family coming together, but as a business arrangement where everyone gets what they need. But I was lonely. And I missed my son. So I sold my beloved brownstone and moved into their gleaming, soulless mansion. The house was a monument to excess. 6 bedrooms, a wine cellar, a home theater, and enough smart home technology to launch a space shuttle. Every light, every thermostat, every speaker was connected to Vanessa's phone. She controlled it all with the casual authority of someone who believed the world existed to serve her. My private quarters consisted of a bedroom and bathroom on the first floor, tucked behind the kitchen. The room was beautiful. Vanessa had that much right, but it felt staged, like a hotel suite designed by someone who'd never actually lived in it. The first month passed in a blur of adjustment. I picked up the twins from their private Montessori school. I meal prepped organic lunches Vanessa had pre-approved. I folded laundry using her specific technique, organized the pantry by color and expiration date, and learned to walk softly through the house so I wouldn't disturb her filming schedule. "Background noise ruins my content," she'd explained with that practiced smile. "I'm building a brand, Margaret. Every detail matters. I noticed things, of course. Small things that didn't quite add up. The way Vanessa would glance at her phone and smirk when I entered a room. How Trevor would ask oddly specific questions about what I'd done that day, as if he already knew. The fact that Alexa would sometimes chime with responses to things I'd only whispered to myself. But I dismissed it. Paranoia, I thought. Old age making me suspicious. Then came the Hawaii trip. If this story grips your soul, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm genuinely curious to know. Vanessa appeared at my door on a Tuesday morning, dressed in athleisure that probably cost more than my monthly teacher's pension. "Trevor and I are going to Maui for 10 days, she announced. "Anniversary trip. Just adults. The twins will stay with Trevor's sister in Evanston, so you'll have the house to yourself." She handed me a printed itinerary, emergency contacts, security codes, plant watering schedules. At the bottom, in her looping handwriting, "Enjoy your peace and quiet." "You've earned it." They left on a Friday. Trevor hugged me. Vanessa air-kissed both my cheeks. The twins waved from the back seat of the town car that would take them to their aunts. And then I was alone in 8,000 square feet of architectural perfection. The first 2 days felt like a vacation. I read in the sunroom. I made myself a proper cup of tea, not the lukewarm herbal nonsense Vanessa preferred. I even opened a bottle of wine from their ridiculous collection and watched an old film without Vanessa critiquing my lowbrow taste. But on the 3rd night, I noticed it, a small red light blinking rhythmically from the corner of my bedroom ceiling. I stood on a chair and examined it. The device was disguised as a smoke detector, but the lens was unmistakable. My stomach dropped. I searched the guest bathroom. Another camera, hidden in the air vent. The living room. A lens embedded in the decorative wall clock. The kitchen. A camera inside the range hood, angled directly at the island where I ate my meals. By midnight, I'd found 14 cameras throughout the house, and every single one was still active. I could tell by the faint blinking lights and the subtle whirring when I moved in front of them. They were watching me. Even from Hawaii, I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the camera above me and let rage replace shock. The next morning, I found Vanessa's home office. It was the only room that had always been locked, off limits even to the cleaning staff. But in their hurry to leave, someone had forgotten. Inside was a command center that would make the NSA jealous. 3 monitors displayed live feeds from every camera. My bedroom, the kitchen, even the garage. File folders were labeled by date and room. I clicked on one. Guest Suite, September 14th. There I was, sitting on the edge of my bed, crying softly while looking at a photo of Richard. The video was only 2 minutes long, but it had been saved, cataloged, and labeled Emotional Vulnerability, Good Footage. My hands shook as I opened another folder, Kitchen Moments. Dozens of clips of me cooking, muttering recipes to myself, dancing slightly to music only I could hear. Then I found the folder labeled Highlight Reel. Inside was a professionally edited video, complete with music and graphics. The title card read, Golden Cage, A Portrait of Modern Elder Care by Vanessa Chen Holloway. The video was 18 minutes long. It opened with Vanessa's voice narrating over footage of me moving through the house like a ghost. We invited her into our home with love, Vanessa said. But what we discovered was far more interesting than gratitude. We discovered what happens when someone who once had purpose loses it entirely. Watch as she fragments, as she grasps for meaning in the smallest tasks. The video cut between clips of me talking to myself, organizing the pantry obsessively, sitting alone at dinner. It was edited to make me look pathetic, sad, broken. There was a comment section beneath the video. It was unlisted, but had been shared with select people. Someone named Brittany K commented, "This is so good, V. Have you pitched it to Netflix yet?" Another comment from someone called Josh Media Group, raw and authentic. "Let's talk about a short film deal." I sat in that leather desk chair in that cold office and realized my daughter-in-law had been building her next career pivot on the surveillance footage of my grief. But then I found something else. A contract signed 3 months ago between Vanessa and a production company called Meridian Media Group. The deal outlined a documentary series about intergenerational living and the hidden dynamics of modern families. The payout? $250,000 for a pilot episode, with potential for a full series. Vanessa had sold my life, literally. She'd monetized my loneliness. And Trevor had signed off as co-producer. But here's what they didn't know. The contract had a clause. Any subject featured prominently in the content had to sign a release form. Without it, the footage was legally unusable. I'd never signed anything, because they'd never asked. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to dismantle everything they'd built. First, I copied every file from the computer onto 3 separate hard drives. Every camera angle, every edited video, every email between Vanessa and her producers. Second, I called my old colleague, Patricia Chen, no relation to Vanessa, thankfully, who'd left teaching to become an entertainment attorney. I sent her everything. Her response was immediate. "Margaret, this is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Invasion of privacy, elder abuse, unlawful surveillance, and intellectual property theft. We can bury them, but I wasn't ready to sue. Not yet." Third, I did something Vanessa would never expect. I started performing for the cameras. I became the world's most suspicious houseguest. I walked through the house talking to myself about my investments and the documentation I'd saved. I made fake phone calls to imaginary attorneys, saying things like, "Yes, I'll bring all the evidence to our meeting on Thursday." I left printed documents around the house, fake legal briefs about surveillance law, elder exploitation, and fraud. I even printed a fake letter from the Illinois Attorney General's office thanking me for my detailed complaint. I knew Vanessa was watching from Hawaii. I could imagine her panic, refreshing the camera feeds obsessively, seeing me transform from their docile subject into something they couldn't control. But then I found something that changed everything. Hidden in the filing cabinet was another folder. This one labeled Estate Strategy. Inside were emails between Trevor and Vanessa from 2 years ago. 6 months before Richard died. The subject line: accelerating the timeline. I read with mounting horror as they discussed my financial situation, the value of my brownstone, and how much they could reallocate once I moved in with them. There was even a cost-benefit analysis comparing keeping me in assisted living versus having me in their home under observation. One email from Vanessa made my blood run cold. Your mother's house is worth 1.2 mutters. If we can establish cognitive decline or unsafe living conditions, we can push for power of attorney within 18 months. The documentary gives us grounds. We show the footage, her talking to herself, forgetting things, living in isolation. It's a perfect case for diminished capacity. Trevor's response: Mom would never forgive me. Vanessa's reply: she won't have to know. Once we have control, we can manage her care our way. The house money funds the twins' education. Everyone wins. They weren't just surveilling me for content. They were building a legal case to strip me of my autonomy and my assets. I sat on the floor of that office. Papers scattered around me and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, crystallized fury. I spent the next day executing my plan with surgical precision. I called Patricia and sent her the estate emails. She nearly screamed through the phone. This is conspiracy to commit fraud, financial elder abuse. Margaret, this is criminal. Then I called my financial advisor and moved all my liquid assets into an irrevocable trust, naming my granddaughters as beneficiaries with Patricia as trustee. Trevor and Vanessa couldn't touch it now. Next, I contacted every person Vanessa had shared the documentary footage with. I introduced myself as the subject who'd never consented to being filmed. I CC'd Patricia on every email. Within hours, Meridian Media Group sent Vanessa a terse email terminating the contract due to compliance issues. The $250,000 deal evaporated, but I saved the best for last. On the night before they returned from Hawaii, I threw a dinner party. Not at their house, I wasn't that petty. I rented a private dining room at Gibson's Steakhouse in downtown Chicago and invited 20 people, Trevor's law partners, Vanessa's influencer friends, my former teaching colleagues, and several journalists I knew from Richard's days writing for the Tribune. The invitations were simple. Margaret Holloway requests your presence for an evening of revelation and reflection. Everyone came. They were curious, confused, intrigued. I played the documentary footage on a large screen, unedited clips of me in their home, surveilled without consent, narrated by Vanessa's clinical, detached voiceover that painted me as a tragic figure. Then I played the emails about stealing my estate. The room fell silent. One of Trevor's senior partners stood up and left immediately. 2 of Vanessa's influencer friends were recording on their phones. The irony wasn't lost on me. A Tribune reporter asked if I'd be willing to give an interview. I smiled. I already have. Here's what I didn't tell anyone at that dinner. I'd already sold my story. While Vanessa was in Hawaii, I'd contacted a producer I knew from Richard's journalism days. I pitched him a documentary. The Watcher watched how one family tried to steal my life. He bought it immediately. For $400,000, plus back-end participation. The documentary would feature everything: the surveillance, the exploitation, the estate conspiracy. But unlike Vanessa's version, mine would have something hers never could: the truth. My voice. My perspective. I signed the contract the morning they landed at O'Hare. They walked into the house just after 9 p.m., jet-lagged and sunburned. I was sitting in the living room reading a book under the soft glow of a lamp. "Mom?" Trevor's voice was uncertain. "We need to talk." Vanessa stood behind him, arms crossed, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. I closed my book calmly. "I agree." We sat in the formal dining room, the one they only used for impressing guests. The irony was delicious. Trevor started with apologies. Weak, hollow apologies about security measures and misunderstandings. I let him finish. Then I slid a folder across the table. "These are copies of every surveillance video you took of me, along with the emails discussing stealing my estate, and the contract with Meridian Media that you forged my participation in." Vanessa's face went white. I've secured legal counsel, I continued. I've moved my assets into an irrevocable trust. I've terminated your production deal, and I've sold my own documentary about this experience to a major streaming platform. It premieres in 3 months. Trevor looked like he might be sick. Mom, we can explain. No need, I said. I've already explained it. To your law partners, to Vanessa's sponsors, to the Illinois Attorney General's office, and soon to about 40 million viewers. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice shaking with rage. You had no right to go through our private files. I smiled. Funny, I was thinking the same thing about my private moments. I moved out the next day. Not to some modest apartment, but to a beautiful vintage condo in Lincoln Park that I purchased with the advance from my documentary deal. It had exposed brick floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony overlooking the park. It was mine. Completely, utterly mine, Trevor tried to reconcile. He sent flowers, letters, awkward text messages. I responded once. When you're ready to apologize for real, not just for getting caught, we can talk. Vanessa's influencer career imploded within weeks. Screenshots of her surveillance operation went viral. Brands dropped her. Her lifestyle blog lost 90% of its followers. The schadenfreude was glorious, but I took no joy in it. I was simply reclaiming what they'd tried to steal, my dignity. 6 months later, my documentary premiered at Sundance. It won the Audience Award. The New York Times called it a searing indictment of elder exploitation in the age of content creation. Variety wrote, Margaret Holloway proves that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's telling your truth so powerfully that the world listens. Trevor showed up at my condo one evening, alone. He looked older somehow, tired. We sat on my balcony with tea, and for the first time he cried. Real tears. He apologized, not for getting caught, but for losing himself in Vanessa's ambition, for forgetting that I was his mother. Not content, I forgave him. Not because he deserved it, but because I refused to carry that weight anymore. The twins visit me now, every other weekend. We bake cookies, read books, and talk about things that matter. They don't know the details of what happened, and they won't until they're old enough to understand. But they know their grandmother is strong. That she has her own home, her own life, her own voice, and they know that cameras, when used right, can expose the truth. I'm 69 now. I wake up in my sunlit bedroom without checking for red blinking lights. I drink my coffee on the balcony and watch the city come alive. I'm writing a book, a memoir about resilience, autonomy, and the high cost of family loyalty when it's demanded rather than earned. Sometimes people ask if I regret how things ended. If I wish I'd handled it differently, more quietly, with less spectacle, I tell them the same thing every time. I spent a year of my life being watched. Now the world is watching them. That seems fair to me. The cameras caught everything they wanted. A lonely widow, trying to stay relevant, trying to be useful, trying to earn her place in a family that saw her as a commodity. But what they didn't capture, what they never understood, was that I'd been teaching teenagers for 40 years. I knew how to spot a bully. I knew how to gather evidence. And I knew how to fight back. They thought they were documenting my decline. Instead, they filmed their own, and that, I think, is the most poetic justice of all. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear where you're listening from in the comments below. And remember, you're never too old to reclaim your power. Sometimes the cameras that try to diminish you become the very tools that set you free.